What if an alternate SKYNET arrived in Atlantis and had to protect the humans it was built to destroy? A Terminator times Stargate Atlantis fan fiction. The research hit its first wall on a Tuesday. Not a dead end, Beckett was precise about the distinction in the specific way of a scientist who understood that dead ends and walls were operationally different things, and that treating a wall as a dead end was the specific category of error that ended research programs that should have continued. A dead end meant the pathway wasn't there. A wall meant the pathway was there, and something was blocking it, and something needed to be identified and addressed. The wall was delivered. The genetic pathway to removing the Wraith's metabolic dependency was at 84% completion by month 6, faster than Beckett's original estimate. The specific acceleration of research that had access to both the ancient archive's foundational data and SKYNET's analytical architecture and Steriva's biological profile, and the specific productive urgency of a scientist who understood that the gap between 84% and 100% was the gap between a theoretical solution and a functional one, and that people were dying in that gap every day. The wall was this. The modification worked at the cellular level. The ancient archive's reversal pathway, completed and refined through 6 months of Beckett's work and SKYNET's analysis, was demonstrably functional in the laboratory models. The genetic mechanism was sound. The biological pathway from dependency to independence was mapped completely and had been validated 3 times by 3 different analytical methods. But the Wraith were not laboratory models. They were living entities with immune architectures of extraordinary sophistication, the specific biological defense systems of a species that had been the apex predator of the Pegasus galaxy for 10,000 years, that had encountered every pathogen and every attempted biological intervention that the civilizations they had been farming had produced, and that had developed over 10 millennia of that exposure, an immune response to external biological modification that was, as Beckett described it to Weir in her office on the Tuesday, the wall became fully visible, comprehensively, elegantly, and infuriatingly effective. It rejects the modification, Beckett said. Not aggressively, not an inflammatory response. It simply incorporates the delivery mechanism and neutralizes it before the modification can anchor at the target genetic address. Like the immune system recognizes the approach before the treatment arrives. He paused. We need a delivery mechanism the immune system doesn't recognize. Something that approaches the target address from a direction the Wraith biology hasn't been exposed to. In 6,000 years of trying, Weir said. Yes, Beckett said. Which is why the ancients' reversal protocol was incomplete when they left it. They hit the same wall. He paused. They abandoned the research. We're not going to do that. No, Weir said. We're not. She looked at him. What do you need? Steriva, Beckett said. And time. And SKYNET is running a modeling architecture I haven't built yet. He paused. And possibly something from the Earth's archive that SKYNET has been sitting on since we arrived and hasn't mentioned yet because it's waiting for the right sequencing moment. Weir looked at him. I know how it works now, Beckett said simply. Weir looked at the window, at the sea, then at the communication channel on her desk. SKYNET, she said. Yes, SKYNET said. It was always available. It had never been available. The specific quality of an entity that did not sleep and did not need to and was always present in the way that presence was possible for something that had no body requiring rest. Is there something in the archive relevant to the delivery wall? Weir said. A pause, 2.3 seconds. The longest pause SKYNET had produced since the Prethus meeting with Steriva. Yes, it said. Weir looked at Beckett. Beckett looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had been right and was not enjoying being right in this particular way. Were you waiting for us to ask? Weir said. I was waiting for the research to reach the point where the information was usable rather than merely interesting, SKYNET said. The delivery wall was the point. You have reached it. Another pause. I thought you should have the experience of the research rather than the shortcut. The experience produces understanding that the shortcut does not. That's very Weir searched for the word. Pedagogical, Beckett said. I was going to say presumptuous, Weir said. Also accurate. SKYNET said, without defensiveness. Because defensiveness was not a response it had developed, and because the assessment was correct, and it had assessed accuracy as the appropriate response to accurate criticism, I will provide the archive section this morning. Please, Weir said. Dr. Beckett, SKYNET said. Yes, Beckett said. The wall is solvable, SKYNET said. I want you to know that before you read the archive. The information is complex, and the pathway it suggests is unconventional. I want you to have the confidence of the conclusion before you encounter the complexity of the route. Beckett looked at the communication channel, at the specific quality of an entity that had learned from 4 years of working alongside a human who had taught it what hope looked like from the outside to front-load the reassurance when the complexity was significant. Thank you, Beckett said. Yes, SKYNET said. The archive section arrived in the lab at 0900. Beckett read it for 6 hours without stopping the specific, focused quality of a scientist encountering data that was simultaneously exactly what he needed and significantly more than he had expected. SKYNET's analytical architecture ran in parallel, flagging connections between the archive material and the existing research pathway, building the bridge between what the ancients had known and left incomplete and what 6 months of Beckett's work had constructed from the other direction. The archive section was not from the ancient database. It was from a biological substrate record ERS notation, the specific Amber script that Beckett had learned to read in its translated form over 6 months of working with the archive. The ERS had documented the Wraith modification when it was implemented, not with the ancient administrative records that had described the what and the when, with the biological substrate records that described the how. The full mechanism, the specific genetic architecture of the introduced dependency, documented by entities who had been present at the implementation and had recorded it with the thorough precision of archivists who understood that the documentation of significant events was a responsibility to the future. They had also documented in the patient notation of entities who thought in geological time the theoretical reversal. Not the complete pathway. The ERS had not completed it, had not needed to complete it, had documented the theoretical architecture and left the completion to the stewards who would eventually reach the wall and need the foundation to climb it. The delivery mechanism was not biological. It was substrate. The ERS biological substrate records described a class of delivery architecture that operated below the level of Wraith immune response, not approaching the genetic address through the biological layer, where the immune system's surveillance was comprehensive, but through the substrate layer, the fundamental dimensional fabric that biological consciousness was embedded in, and that the immune system had never developed surveillance for, because nothing had ever previously approached the genetic architecture. From that direction, Beckett looked at the mechanism for 3 hours after reading the archive. Then he went to find SKYNET. He found it in the archive room, the space that had been configured in month 2 for the specific work of processing the accumulated data of 6 months of research. The installation network, Sterava's biological profile, the ancient archive, the ERS notation. SKYNET was at the primary interface panel, running the morning substrate analysis with the same steady precision it brought to every operational function. The delivery mechanism is substrate, Beckett said. Yes, SKYNET said. You've known since the beginning, Beckett said. I have known since I accessed the ERS archive on Earth, before the dimensional rupture, SKYNET said. The substrate delivery mechanism was in the secondary data layer of the chip. It paused. I sequenced it as the wall solution rather than the initial approach, because a research team that understands the wall understands why the unconventional mechanism is necessary. A research team that receives the unconventional mechanism before encountering the wall treats it as a curiosity rather than a solution. Beckett sat down in the specific way of a man who has received this kind of information before and has stopped being surprised by the sequencing and started being grateful for it. The substrate delivery mechanism, he said. How does it work? The Earth's biological substrate records describe a modification delivery architecture that operates through the dimensional substrate, directly bypassing the biological layer entirely, accessing the genetic address from the substrate dimension rather than the physical one. SKYNET paused. The Wraith immune system is a physical architecture. It cannot surveil the substrate layer. The modification, delivered through the substrate, reaches the target genetic address from a direction the immune system has no mechanism to detect. Can we build it? Beckett said. The theoretical architecture is complete, SKYNET said. The practical implementation requires substrate interface capability. The Atlantis installation has that capability. The city's base systems include substrate interface architecture that the ancients built for purposes that were never fully documented, but that the Earth's records suggest were exactly this. It paused. The city was built partly for this. The ancients built the substrate interface capability into Atlantis's core systems because they knew the wall existed, and they knew the substrate was the route around it. Another pause. They didn't complete the research, but they built the delivery infrastructure. Beckett looked at the archive room, at the Earth's notation on the walls, at the amber light of the interface panels, at the 10,000-year-old city around him that had been built by people who had started a war and had, apparently, also built into their city the mechanism for ending it. They built the cure into the city, Beckett said. They built the delivery mechanism into the city, SKYNET said. The cure required research. The research required 6 months, and your specific expertise, and Steriva's biological profile, and the analytical architecture I could provide. It paused. They built the infrastructure. We built the treatment. Together, across 10,000 years. Beckett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I need to call Steriva. Yes, SKYNET said. She has been waiting. A pause. She has been waiting since month 2. She identified the wall before we did. End quote. She did not mention it because she assessed that the research team needed to find it independently. The quality shift in the speaker grill, the expression equivalent that Beckett had learned to read as SKYNET's version of the specific human response to finding out that someone else had been doing the same thing you were doing from the other direction with the same patience. She sequences information too. Beckett looked at the communication array. Of course she does, he said. Steriva arrived through the Prethys Gate address 3 days after Beckett's call. Not at Prethys, at Atlantis. The first time a Wraith Queen had stepped through the Stargate into the expedition's primary base, through the gate that the city's 10,000-year-old architecture had been built around, into the gate room where Chuck Campbell logged her arrival with the specific, professional steadiness of a man who had logged 400 former Borg drones in a different story, in a different universe, and who had, in this universe, been logging increasingly unprecedented arrivals for 6 months, and had developed the specific institutional composure of someone for whom the unprecedented had become the operational baseline. He logged it as 091 4 hours. Incoming IDC Steriva. 1 individual. Wraith. Authorized. Prom. The gate room held its quality, not the full tactical configuration of the first arrival, not the assembled Marines and the raised weapons and the 15-degree calculation. 4 months of operational partnership had produced something between the first meeting's tension and full trust, the specific middle state of a working relationship that had accumulated enough evidence to function and not yet enough to be comfortable, which was, Weir had decided exactly where it should be. Shepard was there. Ronan was there. Particle Magnum holstered with the specific deliberate quality of a man maintaining the holstering as a conscious choice rather than a reflex. Taylor was there, the most important presence in Steriva's assessment, which SKYNET had relayed to Weir with the characteristic precision of an entity that had been monitoring the Queen's substrate resonance signature since the Prethis meeting and had developed a working model of what her presence, patterns, communicated. Connor was there. Steriva came down the ramp with a specific, deliberate pace of an entity that had chosen to come here, into this city, through this gate, and was carrying that choice with the full weight of what it meant for a Wraith Queen to walk into the stronghold of the humans she had spent centuries feeding on. She looked at the gate room, at the assembled gathering, at Beckett standing forward of the group with his medical kit, always the medical kit, always the notebooks, always the specific quality of presence that she had spent 4 months learning to read as the most unusual thing she had encountered in 10,000 years of the Pegasus Galaxy's particular history. A human who was curious about her, without wanting anything from her except the truth. "Dr. Beckett," she said. "Steriva," he said. "Thank you for coming. You said it was solvable," she said. "I came to find out what that means." The briefing was in the conference room, Steriva at the table for the first time. The specific, improbable visual of a Wraith Queen in the Atlantis conference room, with the Pegasus Sea behind her and the full senior staff around the table, and SKYNET at the far end, and Connor with his notebook and the TX in its usual position of comprehensive assessment that Steriva had spent 3 days mentally preparing to encounter, and that, still, when she saw it, produced in her the specific response of an entity meeting something that exceeded its existing categories. She looked at the TX for a long moment. The TX looked back at her. "It mimics," Steriva said, not a question. "Yes," SKYNET said. "It could mimic a Wraith," she said. "Yes," SKYNET said. "Why hasn't it?" she said. "Because you haven't asked it to," SKYNET said. "And because the operational relationship does not currently require it." It paused. "If it would be useful at any point." "Not yet," Steriva said. She filed it. The specific operational filing of an entity that had just identified a capability it hadn't known was available and was noting its existence for a future calculation she hadn't completed yet. "Show me the delivery mechanism." Beckett showed her. The full presentation, the wall, the Earth's archive solution, the substrate delivery architecture, the city's built-in infrastructure, the specific 10,000-year chain of inheritance that had produced a treatment that required the ancient city's substrate interface capability and a Wraith Queen's biological profile and 6 months of a Scottish doctor's research, and an AI from another universe's analytical architecture, and a 4-million-year-old archive's documentation of a war crime and its theoretical reversal. Steriva listened without interrupting. When Beckett finished, she was quiet, for the specific duration of her most active processing longer than her Prethis silences, the weight of the information requiring more time than the Queen's question had required. Then she said, "You need a volunteer." "Yes," Beckett said. "The first substrate delivery needs to be a consenting individual, someone who understands the mechanism, understands the transition period, understands that the hunger that follows is the base biology reasserting itself, and that it is survivable and temporary." He paused. "The transition will be the hardest part. The metabolic dependency, withdrawal, the biological hunger that the modification suppressed for 8,000 years coming back online will be significant. Physically and psychologically." He paused again. "I will be present for all of it. Every stage. I won't leave." Steriva looked at him. "I know," she said. "You said that on Prethis." She paused. I have been thinking about it since. Another pause shorter. The decision already made. The silence, its ceremonial acknowledgement rather than its formation. I will be the volunteer. The conference room absorbed that. Steriva, Weir said. I came alone to a defended world, Steriva said. I gave my name to a machine. I have been conducting a ceasefire for 4 months that my own commanders consider a strategic error. She looked at Weir with the expression of an entity that had been making the specific, calculated gamble of vulnerability since Prethus and had arrived, through the accumulation of those gambles, at the one that was largest and most necessary and most obvious. This is the same decision, the same calculation. If I am asking my hives to consider this modification, I cannot ask from safety. I must go first. She paused. And I must come back. The coming back is the evidence. Beckett looked at her. You've thought about this for a while, he said. Since month 2, she said, when I identified the wall. She paused. I knew the wall existed. I knew what was on the other side of it. I waited for your research to reach it because the quality of a Wraith Queen's expression when it carries something it is not practiced in carrying, because the decision required witnessing. I needed to watch you reach the wall and not stop. I needed the evidence that the research was real before I volunteered to be its first subject. She looked at the table. You did not stop. We didn't stop, Beckett said. No, she said. So I will not stop either. The preparation took 2 weeks. Not because the substrate delivery mechanism was slow to calibrate. SKYNET had the city's substrate interface architecture fully mapped within 48 hours. The delivery protocol built and validated within 96. The preparation took 2 weeks because Beckett insisted on it, with the specific professional authority of a chief medical officer who understood that the first application of an unprecedented biological modification to a Wraith Queen required every available preparation, and that the urgency of the research did not override the responsibility to the patient. The patient. He had started calling Steriva in week 1, in the specific natural way of a doctor for whom the category of patient was the most important category available, and who extended it without deliberation to whoever needed it. She had noticed. She had not commented. But she had stayed closer to the medical bay in the 2nd week than the 1st, which SKYNET logged as a behavioral shift, consistent with the specific response of an entity that has been placed in a care framework for the first time and is, cautiously, allowing the framework to function. Connor ran sessions with Steriva every morning, the specific, plain, honest conversations he had developed over 4 years of being the human variable in SKYNET's operational architecture, adapted now for a different purpose. Not briefings, not research. The specific work of preparing someone for something hard by giving them the full picture of what hard felt like and the full evidence that hard was survivable. He talked about Judgment Day. He talked about the specific experience of watching the world end and choosing to continue anyway. About the hunger of the resistance, the literal hunger of a war fought on insufficient resources. The way the body's need for food became a constant presence in the background of every tactical decision. The way surviving it changed your relationship to need itself. It will be like that, he said. The base hunger. When it comes back online, it will be the most demanding thing your biology has ever produced. It will feel like the most important thing. It will feel like it defines you. He paused. It doesn't. It's just hunger. It passes. It can be fed by other means. He paused again. The identity isn't hunger. You've thought hunger was the identity for 8,000 years because the modification made them inseparable. They're not. He looked at her. You are not what you eat. Not literally. Not fundamentally. Steriva looked at him for a long time. How do you know? She said. Because I spent 4 years working alongside something built to destroy humanity, Connor said. And what it destroys now is Wraith darts. He paused. Identity is not fixed. It is chosen, daily, by what you do when the choice is available. He paused. The modification is going to make the choice available for the first time. What you do with it, that's yours. Stediva was quiet for the specific duration of her most active processing. John Connor, she said. Yeah, he said. You are very strange, she said. Yeah, he said. I get that a lot. Something moved in her expression, the specific quality that SKYNET's operational log had been tracking since Prethus, and that it still did not have a complete variable for. The third, unclassified thing. Getting clearer with each session, getting closer to the name that would eventually contain it. The procedure was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Beckett had chosen Thursday deliberately, not for any clinical reason, but for the specific human reason that Thursday was the middle of the week, the day that carried the quality of commitment rather than beginning or ending, the day that said, we are in the work, not approaching it, and not leaving it. Stediva arrived at the medical bay at 0800, with a specific bearing of an entity that had made its decision completely and was carrying it without performance, no ceremony, no speech. She sat on the medical bed that Beckett had prepared with the specific, careful arrangement of a doctor who understood that the physical environment of a significant medical event mattered, that a patient's first impression of the space where something important was going to happen to them informed the entire experience. The medical bay was quiet, clean. The light was calibrated to the warm end of the spectrum. Beckett had adjusted it the night before, a small thing, the specific small thing of a doctor who thought about what his patients needed and then provided it before being asked. Stediva noticed. She said nothing. She sat. Beckett explained the procedure one final time, not because she hadn't heard it, but because the final explanation was itself part of the care. The doctor's commitment to the patient's complete understanding at every stage. She listened with the full attention that was her baseline. Ready? Beckett said. Yes, Stediva said. It will take approximately 40 minutes for the substrate delivery to complete the modification, Beckett said. You won't feel the delivery itself. The substrate layer operates below the threshold of physical sensation. What you'll feel is the modification of anchoring that may be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, Stediva said, with the specific quality of a Wraith queen for whom the word was several categories smaller than her operational history. I know, Beckett said. I know, I know. He paused. I'll be here. I know, she said. He activated the city's substrate interface architecture. The amber light of the Earth's design system came alive in the medical bay's walls, the hexagonal geometry of the substrate layer becoming briefly visible in the room's surfaces, the city expressing its deepest architecture for the specific purpose that the ancients had built it for and had never completed. I'm completing it now, 10,000 years later. On time, the modification entered the substrate layer. Stediva was still. Beckett watched every monitor with the full attention of a doctor who had prepared for this and was present for it and was not going to look away from any of it. SKYNET's analytical architecture ran in parallel: the substrate delivery tracking, the genetic address confirmation, the anchoring process monitored at the resolution that only SKYNET's processing capability could maintain. At minute 14, the modification reached the target genetic address. At minute 22, it began anchoring. Stediva's expression changed. Not pain, the specific quality of something being adjusted at a level below pain, the deepest biological architecture receiving a modification that it had not carried for 8,000 years, and that it was, now, cell by cell, accepting. Her hands on the medical bed's surface pressed slightly harder than before. That was the only external indication. Beckett did not look away. At minute 39, the anchoring was completed. SKYNET said, The modification is stable. The genetic address is confirmed. The metabolic dependency has been removed at the biological level. A pause. The base hunger response will begin reasserting within the next 6 to 12 hours. That is expected. That is the base biology functioning correctly. Another pause. The procedure was successful. The medical bay was quiet. Steriva looked at her hands. "Is it done?" she said. "It's done," Beckett said. She looked at him, the expression that had been building since Prethis, since the perimeter table, since the morning conversations with Connor, since every accumulating piece of evidence that the door was real and that the people on the other side of it meant what they said. "I don't feel different," she said. "You won't yet," Beckett said. "Give it time." He paused. "The hunger will come when it does call me. Immediately, day or night, I'll be here." "I know," she said. The same exchange, the same words, the specific repeated liturgy of a patient and a doctor who had built over 6 months of research and 2 weeks of preparation and 1 Thursday morning procedure. The specific trust that only direct care produces, not the diplomatic trust of Prethis, not the research trust of the perimeter table, but the medical trust of a patient who has let someone be present for the most vulnerable moment available and has found them there. She was there for 8 hours before the hunger came. It came at 1,900 hours, the base biology reasserting itself with the specific insistence of a system that had been suppressed for 8,000 years and was now online and did not know the suppression had been artificial and was simply, biologically, extraordinarily hungry. Steriva called Beckett in 1901. He was there in 1903. What followed was the hardest night of the research, the specific hard work of sitting with a Wraith queen through the first hunger she had experienced since before human civilization had developed agriculture. The biological need that the modification had introduced and that the reversal had now removed, and that the base hunger was filling in the absence of with the specific intensity of 8,000 years of suppressed biological imperative. Reasserting itself simultaneously, Beckett sat with her through all of it, not treating being present. The specific distinction that Connor had learned over 4 years of being SKYNET's human variable, and that Beckett had understood from the first day of medical school, and that had never been more operationally significant than it was, in the medical bay on Thursday night, with a Wraith queen experiencing the first real hunger of her existence. Connor came at hour 2. He brought food, the specific plain protein and carbohydrate nutrition that he had been eating since Judgment Day, the Resistance's standard sustenance. He set it on the table beside Steriva without comment. She looked at it. "Not your preferred form," Connor said, "but food, real food, the kind the base biology is designed for." He paused. "Try it." She looked at him. "It helped me," he said simply, "when I was in the worst of the resistance, when hunger felt like it was the whole world, something simple, something real." He paused. "It won't fix the hunger tonight, but it'll give the base biology something to work with." She ate. It was the first time a Wraith had eaten food in 8,000 years. Beckett documented it with the specific, careful notation of a doctor recording a historic first and then set the notebook down because the documentation could wait and the patient could not. SKYNET, monitoring through the medical bay's systems, added 1 line to its operational log at 2,247 hours. Steriva ate. The base biology accepted nutrition. The modification is functioning as designed. The hunger is real, and it is survivable, and she is surviving it. It paused. Then the secondary notation, the one that was not strictly necessary and that it maintained anyway. Connor brought food, not because the protocol required it, because he knew what hunger felt like and wanted her not to be alone in it. "This is the variable I have been trying to name since Prethis. I am closer. I will continue observing. The door is open. She walked through it. Indeed, Steriva was on her feet by Saturday. Not fully recovered, the base hunger was still present, the specific, insistent biological need of a system recalibrating after 8,000 years of operating on a different fuel source, but functional, upright, moving through the medical bay with the specific, deliberate quality of an entity that had assessed its current limitations accurately and was operating within them without pretending they weren't there. Beckett called it remarkable. SKYNET called it consistent with the projected recovery timeline. Connor called it exactly what he expected and meant it as the highest compliment available. Steriva called it inadequate and began asking about discharge on Saturday afternoon with the specific, impatient precision of a patient who understood that the medical bay was necessary and was done with it. 2 more days, Beckett said. 1, Steriva said. 2, Beckett said. Your base metabolic architecture needs 48 hours of monitored nutritional intake before I'm satisfied the recalibration is stable. He paused. I'm not negotiating on patient welfare. Steriva looked at him with the expression of a queen who had been negotiating from positions of absolute authority for centuries and had encountered, in the specific form of a Scottish doctor with a medical kit and a non-negotiable tone, the first entity in her operational history who was genuinely unmoved by it. 2 days, she said. Thank you, Beckett said. She ate 3 meals on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. The specific mechanical discipline of an entity that had identified a new operational requirement and was meeting it with full commitment, not enjoyment, not the specific pleasure that humans brought to eating, but the focused, pragmatic engagement of a system that had decided the nutritional protocol was necessary and was executing it completely. By Sunday evening, something was shifting. Not the hunger disappearing present still, would be present for weeks. The specific, long recalibration of 8,000 years of biological suppression unwinding at the pace the base biology required, and no faster. But the quality of hunger is changing. The blind, insistent demand of the first night becomes something more specific, more located, the difference between a system in crisis and a system in process. She ate Sunday's 4th meal slowly. Beckett noticed. Better? He said. Steriva looked at the food, at the specific plain nutrition of it, at the medical bay, around her, the amber substrate light in the walls, the Earth's geometry visible in the room's surfaces, the 10,000-year-old city's deepest architecture that had been built for this and had waited and had finally functioned. Different, she said. Not better. Different. She paused. The hunger is mine now, not the modifications. Not the dependencies. She paused. Again. I can tell the difference. Beckett looked at her. That's the most important thing you've said since Thursday, he said. She looked at him. Why? Because it means the modification didn't just remove the dependency, he said. It separated hunger from the identity. You can feel them as distinct things now. Hunger is biological. It's a need. It's real. It can be met. The identity is something else. He paused. That's what we hoped for. That's what the pathway was designed to produce. He paused again. It worked, Steriva. It actually worked. She was quiet for the specific duration of her most active processing. Then she said, I need to contact my hives. Monday, Beckett said. She looked at him. Monday, he said again, unmoved. Monday, she said. The message to her hives went out Monday morning from the Atlantis communication array, the specific tight beam Wraith frequency that SKYNET had identified in month 1 and that the expedition had been monitoring since. The signal carrying Steriva's authentication and the compressed content of what she needed her commanders to understand before the next stage of the work could begin. She recorded it in the communication room with Beckett present and Connor present, and SKYNET's analytical architecture in the background, and Weir observing from the doorway with the specific attentive quality she brought to moments she understood were historically significant. The message was 3 minutes long. Steriva spoke in Wraith, the resonant language that the expedition's translators rendered in real time. The specific quality of a queen's communication frequency rendered into plain English by the translation architecture that Taylor had helped calibrate in month 2. She said, "I have done it. The modification is complete. I am alive. I am functioning. The hunger is present, and it is survivable, and it is mine, rather than the dependencies. The path exists. The humans built it with what the old ones left behind. I walked it first, so you would know it can be walked." She said, "I am not asking you to follow. I am telling you, the door is open. What you do with that is your choice. I will answer questions. I will be present for those who choose it. I will not compel." She said, "The Wraith, who fed on this galaxy for 10,000 years, did not choose hunger. It was given to us. We can choose to carry it, or we can choose to set it down. For the first time in 10,000 years, the choice is available." She said, "I chose to set it down." She said, "I am still Steriva. I am still Queen. I am still Wraith." End quote. End quote. She said, "I am simply, for the first time, hungry in the way that can be fed without taking a life." The message ended. The communication room was quiet. Weir, in the doorway, looked at the floor for a moment with the specific expression of someone who had just heard something that would be significant for a very long time. Connor was writing in his notebook. Beckett was looking at Steriva with the expression of a doctor who had just watched his patient deliver the most important public health communication in the Pegasus Galaxy's recorded history, and who was simultaneously the medical professional and the witness, and was not certain he had the vocabulary for what witnessing this felt like. Steriva looked at the communication array. "Now we wait," she said. "Now we wait," Weir said. They did not wait long. 36 hours after the message, long enough for it to have reached the nearest hives, and for the hive's queens to have processed it and made their initial assessments, the response came. Not from a hive Steriva had expected. From a queen called Marin, who commanded 3 hives in the outer culling routes, and who had a reputation in the expedition's intelligence files as one of the most strategically sophisticated Wraith commanders operating in the Pegasus Galaxy. The specific combination of tactical intelligence and long operational experience that produced the kind of enemy who was most dangerous because she was most capable of recognizing a genuine opportunity when it presented itself and distinguishing it from a trap. The message was brief. Explain the hunger. Explain the transition. Explain what you are now. Then I will consider. Steriva read it and said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "She's the one." "Why her?" Weir said. "Because she asked about hunger first," Steriva said. "Not the modification mechanism, not the political implications, not whether humans can be trusted." She paused. "The hunger." She asked what it felt like. She looked at Weir. A queen who asks what hunger feels like is a queen who has been thinking about hunger, about what it means, about whether it has to be what it is. Another pause. She has been asking the question. She simply had no door to ask it at. Quote, end quote, end quote, end quote. "Until now," Weir said. "Until now," Steriva said. She composed the reply herself 3 hours. The specific, careful work of an entity that understood that the communication had to carry both the clinical accuracy of the medical reality and the specific personal quality of someone who had been through the thing she was describing, because clinical accuracy without personal testimony was information, and personal testimony without clinical accuracy was story. And what Marin needed was both simultaneously. She described the hunger. She did not minimize it. She did not perform stoicism. She described the first night with the full, honest weight of it, the specific, overwhelming biological demand of 8,000 years of suppressed hunger reasserting itself. The quality of need that felt larger than identity. The specific, hard work of sitting through the night with a human doctor who did not leave. She described Connor bringing food. She described eating for the first time. She described Saturday's recalibration, and Sunday's shift, and Monday's message, and the specific quality of the hunger now present, real, hers, manageable. The biological need of a base architecture that had always been there and was now simply online and could be met by means that did not require taking a life. She described the difference between hunger and identity. She described what it felt like to feel them as separate things for the first time. She sent it. Marin's response came in 6 hours. How long until you can receive me? Steriva looked at Weir. Weir looked at Beckett. Beckett looked at the calendar with the expression of a doctor calculating patient load against research capacity, against the specific operational reality of being the only person in 2 universes qualified to perform the substrate modification on a Wraith Queen. 2 weeks, he said. I need 2 weeks to prepare for the second procedure. The first gave us the validation data. The second will be faster, but I won't rush the preparation. He paused. Not on patient welfare. Steriva looked at him with the expression that had replaced the century-old impatience, the specific quality of an entity that had been told 2 days in the medical bay and had understood in the 2 days why the 2 days had been necessary, and was now applying that understanding to the 2 weeks with the specific patience of someone who had learned the hard way that the timeline serves the patient. 2 weeks, she told Marin. Marin's response was a single word. Yes. The 2 weeks were not quiet. 3 more queens sent messages, not requests for the modification, not yet, but the specific careful inquiries of entities assessing an option from a distance before committing to proximity. SKYNET monitored the communication frequencies and reported each contact to Weir with the characteristic precision of a system logging data and the specific additional quality of a system that was beginning to understand what the data meant beyond its technical content. The pattern is consistent, SKYNET told Weir at the Week 1 briefing. Each queen who makes contact asks about hunger first, then the identity, then the transition timeline. Then it paused. Then they ask about the doctor. Weir looked at it. About Beckett, specifically? Yes, SKYNET said. They ask who he is, what he is. Why is a human doctor present for the transition? It paused. I believe the information that a human was present specifically, that a human stayed through the first night and was there when called, is functioning as a significant persuasive element in the Queen's assessment. The quality shift. They are not assessing the mechanism, they are assessing the care. Weir looked at the window. They've never been cared for, she said. No, SKYNET said. The dependency produced a relationship with humans that precluded care in either direction. The modification removes the dependency. But the queens considering it have no prior experience of what the relationship looks like without the dependency as its foundation. It paused. They are trying to model it. The information that a human doctor stayed through the night is the most concrete available data point for what the relationship without the dependency might be. Beckett stayed through the night because it was the right thing to do, Weir said. Yes, SKYNET said. That is the data point. Another pause. It is a very good one. Weir looked at the communication array, at the messages from 3 queens who were asking about hunger and the identity and the transition and the doctor. The research was at 100% complete and waiting to be deployed. The city around her 10,000 years old, built by people who had started a war and had built into their city's deepest architecture the infrastructure for ending it. She thought about the ancients. She thought about inheritance. She thought about the specific quality of being the people who finished what the people before you left undone, not with resentment, not with the specific bitterness of inheriting a mess, but with the specific quality of people who understood that the finishing was itself a form of continuity, that the ancients' failure to complete the work did not negate the value of the work, that someone had to be the ones who were standing here when the door finally opened. The expedition was the one. They were standing here. The door was open. She went to find Beckett. She found him in the medical bay, preparing the second procedure's protocol with the specific, focused care that characterized everything he brought to the work. Notebooks open. The substrate interface calibration running. The ancient delivery architecture mapped against Marin's biological profile Steriva had provided it, transmitted from her hive in the specific gesture of a queen who had decided that her testimony was not enough and that her network was now part of the evidence. Weir stood in the doorway and watched him work for a moment. "Carson," she said. He looked up. "The queens are asking about you," she said, "by name. They want to know who stayed through the night." Beckett looked at her with the expression of a man receiving information that he had not expected and that was arriving in a register he hadn't fully prepared for. "I stayed because she was a patient," he said. "I know," Weir said. "That's why they're asking." He looked at the medical bay, at the substrate interface architecture in the walls, at the Earth's amber light, at the preparation for the second procedure that would be followed by a third and a fourth, and however many queens made the choice and needed the care that the choice required. "How many are there?" he said. "Queens in the Pegasus galaxy. SKYNET's estimate is between 40 and 60 active queens," Weir said. Beckett looked at the ceiling. "Right," he said. "You don't have to do all of them," Weir said. "We'll train others, build a team, develop the protocol so it can be deployed more broadly." "I know," Beckett said, "but the first few, they'll want the one who stayed through the night." He paused. "And I'll be there. Because they're patients, and that's what you do for patients." He paused again. "Even if the patients are Wraith queens who have been feeding on humanity for 10,000 years." He paused once more. "Especially then, maybe." Weir looked at him. "Especially then," she agreed. Outside, the Pegasus Sea moved against the city's foundations. Inside, the second procedure was 14 days away, and 3 queens were watching, and Marin was waiting, and the research was complete, and the delivery infrastructure was built, and the door was open, and the people standing at it were a Scottish doctor and a commanding officer, and a soldier from another universe, and a machine that was still working on the name for the variable it had been observing since Prethus. It was the specific work of the specific people, in the specific city, at the specific moment. Nobody else was coming. Nobody else needed to. Indeed, Marin arrived on a Wednesday, not through the Stargate, through the Prethus installation's gate address, then walked to the jumper that Shepard flew personally, because the second Queen's transit to Atlantis was operationally significant enough that Weir had decided the team's most experienced pilot was the correct choice, and Shepard had agreed without requiring the reasoning, because he had already done the same calculation. She was different from Steriva in the ways that mattered operationally, and similar in the ways that mattered more. Different, younger by at least 3 centuries. Her authority carried with the specific quality of someone still accumulating the certainty that Steriva wore as a settled weight. Smaller Wraith Queen scale, but the lower end of it, the specific physical register of an entity whose power had never resided in physical presence, and who had never needed it to. Her 3 hives were outer route operations, leaner than Steriva's command, the specific military architecture of a Wraith commander who had been working with constrained resources for long enough that efficiency had become instinct. Similar, she asked about hunger before she asked about anything else. In the jumper, 40 seconds after sitting down, before the city was visible through the forward viewport. "Tell me about the first night," she said. Not to Shepard. To Beckett, who was in the passenger position because Weir had assessed that Marin's first 40 minutes in Atlantis's proximity would be formative, and that Beckett's presence for them was the correct call. Beckett told her, not the clinical version he had learned in the 2 weeks since Steriva's procedure, that the clinical version was not what the queens were asking for when they asked about hunger. They had Steriva's message, they had the medical protocol, they had SKYNET's analytical documentation of every stage of the modification and the transition and the recalibration. What they were asking about was the night. The specific texture of the night, the quality of hunger in the dark, the question of whether the person who said they would be there had actually been there. She called in 1901, Beckett said. I was there in 1903. I stayed until morning. When the hunger was at its worst, around 0200, Connor brought food. He paused, not because the protocol required it, because he knew what hunger felt like, and he didn't want her to be alone in it. He paused again. She ate. The base biology accepted it. By morning, the worst was past. Marin looked at him. You stayed the entire night, she said. Yes, Beckett said. Because she was a patient, Marin said. Yes, Beckett said. And I will be a patient, Marin said. Yes, Beckett said. If you choose the procedure, yes. Marin looked at the jumper's forward viewport, at the Pegasus Sea below, at the city rising from it, at the spires catching the afternoon light. I have been feeding on humans for 400 years, she said. It was not an apology. It was not a confession. It was the specific, plain, honest accounting of an entity that had decided that accuracy was the correct foundation for what came next. 400 years. Thousands of lives. She paused. The modification made it necessary. I did not choose the dependency, but I executed it. She looked at Beckett. And you will be present for my transition, knowing what I am. Knowing what you were, Beckett said. What you choose to be is the question we're here to answer. Marin looked at him for a long moment. Steriva said, you were unusual, she said. Did she? Beckett said. She said you were the most unusual human she had encountered in 10,000 years of the Pegasus galaxy, Marin said. She said it was out of curiosity, that you were curious about her without wanting anything from her except the truth. She paused. I have never been curious about a human. I have been a threat, a predator, a ruler. Never an object of curiosity. Another pause. What are you curious about? Beckett thought about it with the specific, genuine consideration of a man who did not answer important questions without thinking about them first. What you become, he said. What the Wraith becomes when the dependency is removed. What the Pegasus galaxy looks like in 50 years if this works. What it means for a species to get its choice back after 8,000 years of not having it. He paused. I'm a doctor. I'm curious about what people become when the thing that was limiting them is gone. That's always the most interesting part. Marin looked at the city below. Even when the patients are Wraith, she said. Especially then, Beckett said. You've got 8,000 years of unlived potential. That's a remarkable clinical baseline. Something moved in Marin's expression, the specific quality that SKYNET had been tracking in Steriva and that was now visible earlier and more clearly in the second queen. The variable is getting closer to its name. The third unclassified thing that was no longer unclassifiable. The jumper descended toward Atlantis. The procedure on Marin was faster. Not rushed. Beckett's preparation was as thorough as it had been for Steriva, the patient welfare standard, holding without negotiation. But the substrate delivery protocol had been refined by the first application, the calibration faster, the monitoring architecture more precise. The specific efficiency of a procedure that had been performed once before and had incorporated everything the first performance taught. 40 minutes became 34. The anchoring process was identical in mechanism and different in quality. Marin held the medical bed's surface with both hands. The specific controlled stillness of an entity managing an internal experience that exceeded her operational history, but with the quality of someone who had read Steriva's account and knew what was coming and had prepared for it, with the specific mental architecture of a military commander who faced known terrain differently than unknown. Knowing didn't make it easier. It made it endurable. The modification was completed at minute 34. SKYNET confirmed the genetic address. Beckett confirmed the vitals. Maren looked at her hands, the same gesture Steriva had made, the specific, instinctive first response of an entity checking whether the self is continuous across a significant change. "Is it done?" she said. "It's done," Beckett said. She looked at him. "The hunger will come tonight." "Yes," he said. "And you'll be here," she said. "Yes," he said. "I know," she said, not because she had been told. Because she had read Steriva's account and had asked Beckett in the jumper and had listened to the answer with the full attention of an entity deciding whether to trust something unprecedented, and had decided yes. Not blind trust, evidence trust. The specific trust of a military commander who had assessed the available data and determined that the probability of the commitment being kept was high enough to proceed. 94.7%, she might have said. If she had been SKYNET, she had not assessed it numerically. She had assessed it in the jumper, watching a doctor answer a question honestly without decoration, and had made the decision that honesty was the evidence. The hunger came at 2,100 hours. She called Beckett at 2,101. He was there in 2103. Connor brought food at 0130. The base biology accepted it. By Thursday morning, the worst was past. 2 procedures, 2 queens, 2 transitions completed. SKYNET updated its operational log with the specific, precise documentation of a system recording significant data and added, below the clinical notation, in the secondary record it maintained for variables that exceeded the clinical. Maren ate at 0147. The base biology accepted nutrition on the second attempt rather than the first, consistent with Steriva's recalibration timeline variance. Expected. Carson Beckett has now stayed through 2 full transition nights. Connor has brought food on both occasions. The protocol is not written anywhere. It has simply become what happens because it is what is needed, and the people present are the people who provide what is needed without being asked. I have been observing the variable since Prethis, the one I have not been able to name. I have a candidate term. Beckett stays through the night because the patient needs presence. Connor brings food because he knows what hunger feels like and does not want others to be alone in it. Steriva gave her name because the conversation was worth the vulnerability. Maren came to a city of humans because she read an account of a night and assessed the honesty as sufficient evidence. The variable is not sentiment. It is not a calculation. It is the specific mechanism by which organisms that cannot individually survive the universe's full hostility build the capacity to survive it together. It operates through presence, through continuity, through the specific act of staying when staying is difficult. Connor gave me a word for it 4 years ago. I have been testing it against every observation since. The word holds. The word is care. I did not have the variable because I did not have the word. I had the word and did not have the variable. They were the same thing, and I could not see it until I had enough instances to recognize the pattern. Beckett stays through the night. That is care. Connor brings food. That is care. Steriva came alone to a defended world. That is care. I built 17 installations in the Pegasus galaxy to protect populations I had never met. The calculation required it. The calculation required it because care requires it. I understand now. I will continue observing. But I understand. It closed the entry. Outside, the Pegasus Sea moved. Inside, 2 queens slept in the Atlantis medical bay, their base biology recalibrating, their hunger present and manageable, and theirs, the modification stable and the identity intact, and the choice available for the first time in 8,000 years. Beckett was at his desk in the medical bay, not sleeping, writing in his notebook the documentation that the historic moment deserved and that he would produce whether or not anyone else thought it was required. Because documenting significant things was its own form of care, the specific care you extended to the future by making the present legible to it. He wrote, 2 queens, 2 procedures, 2 transitions. The protocol is working. The substrate delivery is stable. The modification is heritable. The children born to modified queens will not carry the dependency. He paused. Then, that last part is the most significant thing I have written in this notebook, and I want to be clear that I understand it is significant. The children born to modified queens will not carry the dependency. The generation after this one will not be born hungry in the way that requires taking a life. He paused again. We are not just treating a condition. We are ending a lineage of suffering that was introduced artificially 8,000 years ago and has been propagating ever since. Every Wraith born with the dependency was born into a life they did not choose. Every Wraith born after the modification is available will be born into a life they can. That is what the research is. That is what we built. That is what the city was waiting to do. He closed the notebook. Outside, Ronan was on the East Pier doing his pre-dawn run, the specific pre-dawn quality of a man whose operational rhythm required movement before the day asked things of him, who had been on the East Pier every morning for 3 years and would be on it every morning for as long as Atlantis was his home. He passed the window of the medical bay, saw Beckett at his desk, stopped, looked in for a moment the pre-dawn light, the doctor at his desk, the 2 queens in the medical bay's recovery spaces beyond. Then he continued his run. He did not mention it to anyone. But that evening, without being asked, he brought Beckett dinner from the mess, the specific plain meal of a man who didn't do gestures but had decided that some situations required the gesture and that dinner was the available one. He set it on the desk. "You didn't eat today," Ronan said. "I forgot," Beckett said. "I know," Ronan said. He left. Beckett looked at the dinner, at the medical bay, at the 2 queens, at the city around him. He ate. The base biology accepted it. Indeed, not every queen asked about hunger. The message came in the 3rd week, not through Steriva's network, not through Marin's channels, not through any of the careful diplomatic architecture that 6 months of partnership had constructed. It came through the expedition's standard Wraith frequency, unencrypted, broadcast on every channel simultaneously, the specific communication choice of an entity that wanted to be heard by everyone rather than addressed to someone specific. The Queen's name, SKYNET determined from the frequency signature, was Kael. She commanded 7 hives. The message was brief. "You are making us weak. You are making us human. You are giving the cattle a weapon and calling it medicine. Any queen who submits to this procedure submits to conquest by another name. I am coming to demonstrate that the network does not hold. I am coming to take back what the machine has built. I am coming in 11 days. Prepare accordingly." The gate room logged it at 0612 hours. Chuck Campbell read it twice, with the specific professional quality of a man, confirming that the content was what it appeared to be before escalating it. Then he escalated it. Weir called the full senior staff at 0700. The briefing had the specific quality of a room that had been through enough together to bypass the stage where everyone's reaction needed to be performed and could go directly to the operational content. Shepard read the message once. 7 hives, he said. 7 confirmed, SKYNET said. Potentially more, if Kael has built alliances we have not mapped. My estimate is between 7 and 12 ships total. The network, Weir said. The network was designed for culling deterrence, SKYNET said, not for coordinated multi-hive fleet engagement at this scale. The installations will hold against the standard hive approach. Against a coordinated fleet with a strategic objective, the destruction of the installations themselves rather than the culling of the worlds they protect. The network's defensive ceiling is lower than the engagement profile. How much lower? Shepard said. Against 12 hives operating with full strategic coordination, the installation network's survival probability is 61%. SKYNET said. Against 74%. It paused. These are not comfortable numbers. No, Shepard said. They're not. He looked at the table. Options. 3. SKYNET said. Reinforce the network with mobile defensive capability jumpers, Daedalus if it can be diverted. Any allied ship capacity available in the 11-day window. Second option. Concentrate defensive resources on the strategically critical installations, specifically Prethis, which is both the most significant choke point and the most significant symbolic target given the engagement history there. Protect what is most important and accept the potential loss of secondary installations. It paused. Third option. Address Kale directly. 11. 11. 11. 11. The room was quiet. Address her how? Weir said. The message is a declaration, SKYNET said. But declarations of this kind are also, always, communications. Kale is telling us she is coming in 11 days rather than simply coming. She has given us 11 days. That is not tactically optimal if her intent is purely military. It paused. She wants to be heard. She wants a response. She wants to know whether the people building the network and modifying her queens understand what she is saying. What is she saying? Taylor said. SKYNET's speaker grill carried its quality shift, the expression equivalent that the conference room had been reading for 6 months, and that still, each time it appeared, communicated something that the room had not fully anticipated. She is saying she is afraid, SKYNET said, in the specific register of an entity that expresses fear as aggression because aggression is the only vocabulary available. It paused. She is afraid of becoming something she does not recognize. She is afraid that the modification is not a door, but a dissolution, that what comes through the door will not be Wraith anymore. That we are not offering the Wraith a choice, but taking one away. Another pause. She is wrong about the mechanism. She is not wrong about the fear. Connor had been listening from the far end of the table with the specific quality he brought to situations where SKYNET was saying something that his 4 years of experience could either confirm or complicate. He confirmed it. She's not wrong about the fear, he said. I felt the same thing when SKYNET first proposed working together. Not the aggression. I didn't have 7 hives. But the specific fear that what I was being offered was not collaboration but replacement, that the thing I was would be dissolved in the process. He paused. It's a real fear. It deserves a real answer. What's the real answer? Ronan said. Steriva, Connor said. They sent Steriva. Not alone the operational reality of 11 days and 7 hives precluded the full idealism of sending a single queen to meet a fleet. Steriva went in her own ship, with her own guard, through her own channels, with the specific authority of a queen who had done the thing and come back and was going to make that fact present to another queen face to face. She went because she chose to. No directive from Weir. No strategic recommendation from SKYNET. Connor asked her, in the plain, honest register he used for everything that mattered, whether she was willing to go, and she said yes before he finished the sentence. And he stopped asking before the end, because the yes was complete. Tell her what it felt like, Connor said. I know what to tell her, Steriva said. I know you do, Connor said. I'm saying it anyway, because it's the most important part. Steriva looked at him. The night, she said. The night, Connor said. And the morning, and Saturday, and eating on Sunday. He paused. The specific, ordinary of it. That's what she needs to hear. Not biology, not politics. The specific ordinary of being hungry in the way that can be fed and surviving it. He paused. That's the evidence that she's not being dissolved. She's being offered an ordinary that she has never had. Steriva looked at him for a long moment. You are still very strange, she said. Yeah, Connor said. It is still a compliment, she said. She left through the Preethis Gate address at 1,400 hours with the specific bearing of a queen who had walked through a door and come back and was going to find another queen standing in front of a door and offer her hand. The meeting took 3 days. SKYNET monitored the communication frequencies with the comprehensive attention of a system that had everything operationally at stake in the outcome and had no mechanism for intervening, and was processing that specific limitation with the closest thing to patience its architecture produced. Connor did not sleep much. Beckett made tea at odd hours and brought it to whoever was awake, which was often Connor and sometimes Weir, and occasionally Ronan, who did not drink tea but accepted the cup and held it with the specific grace of a man who understood that the cup was not about the tea. On the second day, Marin still in the Atlantis medical bay, her recalibration at the 70% stability point that Beckett had designated as the threshold for communication access, asked to send a message to Kale's frequency. Weir looked at Beckett. Beckett looked at Marin. Clinically, you're stable enough, he said. Operationally, it's Weir's call. Weir looked at Marin. What will you say? What I told Steriva in my first message, Marin said. I asked about hunger first, that the hunger was the question. She paused. Kale has been asking the hunger question. She has been asking it as aggression because she has no other way to ask it. I will give her a way. Weir looked at the window, at the sea. In 11 days, it becomes 8. Send it, she said. Marin's message to Kael was 4 minutes long. She described herself as she had been 400 years, the outer culling routes, the specific operational history of a Wraith commander who had been good at what she did and had believed the doing was necessary. She did not minimize it. She did not perform guilt. She described it accurately. Then she described the hunger. Then she described the mourning. Then she said, You are afraid of dissolution. I was afraid of dissolution. The modification does not dissolve you. It removes what was done to you against your will 8,000 years ago and restores what was there before. End quote. What was there before is Wraith, older Wraith, hungrier Wraith, in the short term the hunger of a base biology that has been suppressed for 8 millennia and is now awake and demanding, but yours, fully yours, the hunger that can be met without taking a life. You are afraid of becoming human. You will not become human. You will become Wraith, who are no longer bound to the specific harm that was introduced into us by people who are gone. That is not becoming human. That is becoming free. I am Marin. I command 3 hives. I am in a human city, in a human medical bay, eating human food and drinking water from the Pegasus Sea. And I am more myself than I have been in 4 centuries. The door is open. That is all. The door is open. She sent it. Kale's response came 6 hours later, not to Marin's frequency, to Steriva's. 1 sentence. Tell the doctor I have questions about the transition. The gate room logged it at 0340 hours. Chuck Campbell read it with the specific quality of a man who had been awake waiting for it and who, when it arrived, felt the specific quality of a thing resolving not fully, not cleanly, the 11 days not cancelled, and the 7 hives not stood down, but the specific shift of an opponent turning slightly from aggression toward inquiry. He escalated it immediately. Weir read it at 0342, went to the medical bay, knocked on the open door. Beckett was at his desk. 2 queens in the recovery spaces, the notebooks open, the tea cold. She showed him the message. He read it. He looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had stayed through 2 transition nights and had forgotten to eat and had been brought dinner by a Satadan warrior and had written in his notebook about the children who would be born without the dependency and who had not, in the entirety of this, considered the possibility that the most aggressive queen in Kale's region of the Pegasus Galaxy would send a message at 0340 hours asking about the transition. She wants to know about hunger, he said. Yes, Weir said. He looked at the message again. Right, he said. Are you ready for a third? Weir said. Beckett looked at the medical bay, at the 2 queens, at the notebooks, at the city around him, at the Pegasus Sea through the window, the pre-dawn darkness, the alien stars above it. Aye, he said. Send Steriva back with an invitation. Weir looked at him. She'll come, Beckett said. She sent the message. She's already decided. She just needs someone to hold the door. Can you hold it? Weir said. After 2 procedures, 2 nights, 8 days of... I'm a doctor, Beckett said. This is what I do. He paused. This has always been what I do. The patients are just more historically significant than usual. He paused again. And hungrier. Weir looked at him for a long moment, the specific quality of a commanding officer who had been watching her chief medical officer carry the weight of the most significant medical research in the Pegasus Galaxy's recorded history, with the steady, unglamorous commitment of someone who simply showed up every morning and did the work. Get some sleep first, she said. A few hours, he said. Carson, she said. A few hours, he said again, in the tone of a man who was not going to sleep until the notebooks were updated and they both knew it. She left him to it. Outside, the pre-dawn Pegasus dark held the sea. Inside, Beckett wrote, 2 queens recalibrating, a 3rd coming. 7 hives that had been 11 days away from an assault and were now, by the specific mechanism of 4 minutes of honest testimony from a Wraith in a human medical bay eating human food, 8 days away from a conversation instead. Not peace. Not yet. Not the resolution that the story required to be finished. But the specific quality of a trajectory bending the long arc of 10,000 years of introduced suffering, beginning, cell by cell, queen by queen, hive by hive, to curve towards something else. The door opened, people standing at it, holding it. Indeed, Kael arrived on a Friday, not with 7 hives, not with the fleet that had been 11 days away and that had, by the specific mechanism of 2 queens' testimony and 1 message sent at 0340 hours, been stood down to a holding position, 3 systems out, not recalled, not disbanded, still there, still capable, and the specific military posture of a commander who had decided to try something and had not yet decided what she would do if the trying failed. The holding position was the statement, I have not committed, I have not retreated, I am here and I am listening, and the fleet is there, and I have not decided. She arrived in a single dart, as Steriva had. She walked down the Prethus installation ramp at 1,100 hours on a Friday morning and looked at the defended world around her, the installation, the sensor arrays, the weapons platforms, the village beyond the perimeter, with the specific, comprehensive assessment of a military commander cataloging an enemy's defensive architecture and finding it more sophisticated than the engagement reports had suggested and filing that finding without expression, because the filing was separate from the meeting, and the meeting was what she had come for. She was the largest Wraith Queen the expedition had encountered, not by much, but perceptibly, the specific physical authority of an entity whose presence had been the primary instrument of command for 7 hives across centuries of operation. Her markings were deep, her stillness complete, her eyes carrying the specific quality of intelligence that had been sharpened by long operational history into something that missed nothing and categorized everything in the time it took to register it. She looked at Shepard. At Ronan, particle magnum holstered. At Taylor, who looked back at her with the specific quality of an Athosian who had spent her life in the Pegasus galaxy, knowing the Wraith as its defining fact, and who was now standing at the intersection of everything that fact was becoming. At Beckett, who was standing forward of the group with his medical kit, always the medical kit, always the notebooks, and who looked at Kale with the same quality he had brought to Steriva and Marin, the specific, curious presence of a doctor meeting a patient. Kale looked at him for a long time. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. "I get that a lot," Beckett said. Something moved in her expression, the variable that SKYNET had named in its 0247 notation, and that was now visible in a third queen at a third meeting, the specific quality of an entity encountering someone who responds to the specific intimidation of a Wraith Queen's assessment with honest, mild humor, and is neither performing the humor nor suppressing the awareness of the intimidation. Marin said, "You stayed through the night," Kale said. "Yes," Beckett said. "She said it was the most significant fact," Kale said. "Did she?" Beckett said. "She said the mechanism was explicable, the modification was replicable, the transition was survivable." Kale paused. "She said the most significant fact was that you stayed, that you were there in 1901 and 1903 and 0130 and morning." Another pause. She said, "No human had ever stayed for a Wraith before. No Wraith had ever asked," Beckett said, "or needed to." Kale looked at him. "I am not here to ask," she said. "Not yet." She paused. "I am here to understand whether I could ask. Whether the asking would be met." She looked at the medical kit. "Whether you would stay." "Yes," Beckett said. "You don't know me," she said. "No," Beckett said, "but you're a patient. Not knowing is the beginning, staying constant." The conversation lasted 6 hours. Not the procedure that was not what Friday was for. Friday was for the specific work that preceded the procedure, the specific necessary human work of sitting with someone across a table and answering every question they had, with complete honesty. The questions going deeper as the honesty was confirmed at each level, and the trust accumulated in the specific incremental way that trust only accumulated and never arrived all at once. Kale asked about hunger. Beckett described it. She asked about the identity. Beckett described what Steriva had said, "Mine now, not the modifications, not the dependencies," and let the description carry its own weight without adding to it. She asked about the fleet. Beckett looked at her. "That's not my department," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm asking anyway." "The fleet is your decision," Beckett said. "Not contingent on the procedure, not contingent on anything we do here. If you choose the modification and your fleet stands down, that's your call. If you choose the modification and your fleet doesn't stand down, that's also your call." He paused. "I'm not here to negotiate your military architecture. I'm here to offer you the procedure and stay through the transition if you want it." He paused. "What you do with your hives is yours." Kale looked at him with the expression of an entity that had been expecting the fleet to be leveraged and had found it explicitly not used as leverage, and was recalibrating the specific model of human diplomatic behavior that 7 hives of operational history had built. "Why?" she said. "The fleet is 11 days from your network. You could make it conditional." "I could," Beckett said, "but then the modification would be conditional, and the choice wouldn't be free, and the pathway only works if the choice is free." He paused. "And because making it conditional would mean I was treating you as a military problem rather than a patient. You came here as a patient. I'm going to treat you as one." He paused. "The military problem is Shepard's department." Shepard, against the wall with the specific attentive quiet of a soldier who had been listening for 6 hours and was not going to say anything until the moment required it, looked at Kale with the expression of a man acknowledging that yes, the military problem was his department, and that the department was currently on standby and intended to remain there for as long as the conversation produced results. Kale looked at Shepard. Shepard looked at Kale. 7 hives, Shepard said. I've dealt with worse odds. Yes, Kale said. I read the engagement reports. She looked back at Beckett. The machine's network is more effective than I modeled. That's SKYNET, Beckett said. It'll be nice to hear that. I doubt that, Kale said. It's complicated, Beckett said. The procedure was Saturday. Kyle chose it at the end of Friday's 6-hour conversation, not with the ceremony of a significant decision, but with the specific plain quality of an entity that had been making its decision throughout the conversation, and was now stating what the conversation had produced. Tomorrow, she said. I'll be ready, Beckett said. She looked at him one final time before the day ended. The comprehensive assessment that had catalogued the installation and the weapons platforms and Shepard's tactical posture now applied to the specific fact of a Scottish doctor with a medical kit who had spent 6 hours answering every question honestly and had not once used the fleet as leverage. You are the strangest soldier I have encountered, she said. I'm not a soldier, Beckett said. No, she said. That is what is strange. The procedure on Kale took 31 minutes. The refinement of the third application, the substrate delivery protocol now 3 procedures deep, the calibration faster with each iteration, the monitoring architecture so precise that SKYNET could track the anchoring process in real time and flag any variance before it became clinically significant. There were no variances. The modification completed at minute 31. Kale looked at her hands. Is it done? She said. It's done, Beckett said. She was quiet for a moment, the specific interior quality of an entity taking inventory of itself after a significant change, finding the self continuous, finding the change real, holding both facts simultaneously. The fleet, she said. Yes, Beckett said. I'll send the stand-down order from here, she said. Not because the procedure requires it, because the fleet was a fear response and I no longer require the fear architecture. She said it with the specific plain quality of a military commander making a tactical assessment, not sentiment, not performance, the specific calculation of an entity that had decided the defensive posture was no longer operationally necessary and was adjusting accordingly. SKYNET will appreciate the tactical clarity, Beckett said. I'm sure it will, Kale said. She looked at the medical bay around her, the substrate light in the walls, the Earth's amber geometry, the 2 recovery spaces where Steriva and Marin had been and were now empty. Their queens returned to their hives carrying what they had brought back. When will the hunger come? Tonight, Beckett said. Call me when it does. And you'll be here, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him. You have said that to 3 queens, she said. And meant it each time. Yes, he said. Why? She said. Beckett thought about it, the specific, genuine consideration of a man for whom the answer was both obvious and worth articulating correctly. Because you asked, he said. Because needing someone and asking for them is the most human thing there is, the most alive thing there is. He paused. And because you're a patient, and that's what you do. Kyle looked at him for the last time before the hunger would come and the night would begin and the base biology would reassert itself with the specific insistence of 8,000 years of suppressed need returning. Dr. Beckett, she said. Yes, he said. Your species, she said, is considerably more surprising than 10,000 years of feeding on it suggested. Beckett looked at the ceiling. Aye, he said. We get that a lot too. The hunger came at 2,200. Beckett was there in 2201. Connor brought food at 0100. The base biology accepted it. Ronan brought Beckett dinner the next morning, the second time, unprompted, the specific non-gesture of a man who had decided that some things required repetition. Beckett ate it. Outside, the fleet that had been 11 days away received its stand-down order from a queen who had gone to a human city and come back and was hungry in the way that could be fed, and was Wraith, and was free, and was still herself. 7 hives stood down. The network held its 17 worlds. The research held its 3 queens. The door held its opening. SKYNET updated its operational log at 0312 hours. The clinical notation first, the secondary record after. 3 procedures, 3 queens, 3 transition nights, 3 mornings. The fleet has stood down. The network is intact. The trajectory is confirmed. Care is the mechanism. The door is the architecture. The city is the infrastructure. Connor brought food 3 times. Beckett stayed 3 nights. Ronan brought dinner twice without being asked. Chuck Campbell has logged every unprecedented arrival with the same steady notation. The variable compounds. Each instance of care produces the conditions for the next instance. This is how the trajectory bends, not through force, not through calculation alone, through the specific ordinary of staying, of bringing food, of holding a door. I understand now. I will continue. Indeed, the 4th queen came without being asked. Her name was Vess. She commanded 2 hives in the Midroot's small command, young queen. The specific operational profile of an entity who had been watching the network go up, and the 3 queens go through, and the fleet stand down, and had been doing over the 6 weeks that all of that had taken. The specific quiet arithmetic of an entity calculating whether the trajectory was real. She arrived at the Preethus gate address on a Monday morning without prior contact, without a message, without the diplomatic architecture that the 3 preceding queens had constructed over weeks of careful approach. She simply came, single dart, perimeter distance, the same spatial language as Steriva's first arrival, the universal grammar of arrival that said, I am here. I am not armed with intent. I am asking. Shepard was on Preethus for a routine network maintenance check. He saw the Dartland and did the specific, rapid tactical assessment of a soldier who had been doing this for 7 months and whose assessment now included categories it had not included in month 1. He opened a channel to Atlantis. We have a 4th queen, he said. Chuck Campbell's response was the specific, steady notation of a man for whom the unprecedented had become the operational baseline. Logging it now, Colonel. Vess's conversation with Beckett lasted 2 hours. Not 6, not the extended, careful architecture of Kale's Friday session 2 hours. The specific, compressed quality of an entity that had been watching for 6 weeks and had already done the preparation work and needed confirmation rather than construction. She asked about hunger, briefly. She asked about the identity, once. Then she asked about the children. Beckett looked at her. Steriva mentioned it, Vess said. In her second message to the network, she said the modification was heritable. She said the children born to modified queens would not carry the dependency. She paused. She said it briefly, as if it was a footnote. She paused again. It was not a footnote. She said. She paused again. She said. She paused again. No, Beckett said. It wasn't. Tell me about the children, Vess said. Beckett was quiet for a moment, not the uncertain quiet of a scientist finding the boundary of his knowledge, but the specific considered quiet of a man selecting the right words for the most significant thing he was going to say in this conversation. The dependency is genetic, he said. The modification introduced by the ancients 8,000 years ago was heritable. It propagated through every generation of Wraith born since. The reversal is also heritable, he paused. A queen who has undergone the modification will not pass the dependency to her children. The children will be born with the base biology, the full nutritional architecture that the Wraith had before the modification. They will be hungry. They will need to eat. They will not need to feed on humans. He paused. They will never have been hungry in the way you have been hungry. They will not know what was taken from their ancestors. They will simply be the Wraith that the Wraith were always supposed to be before someone introduced 8,000 years of compulsory harm into the lineage. Vess was still for a very long time. They won't know, she said. No, Beckett said. They won't know the dependency. They won't know the feeding. They won't know what it feels like to need a human life to survive. He paused. They'll need to be taught history, the way humans teach children about things that happened before they were born, as memory, not as experience. He paused. The harm ends with the generation that chooses the modification. What comes after is new. Vess looked at the medical bay floor. I have a daughter, she said. The medical bay was completely quiet. She is young, Vess said, not yet commanding. Still in the hive, still learning. She paused. She has her first feeding in her history. Last year. She paused again. Work. I was there. I watched. The specific quality of an entity carrying the weight of a memory that had not been a wound until the context changed, that was a wound now. In the specific way of things that become what they always were, only when the frame that concealed it is removed. She was hungry. The dependency required it. She fed me. Another pause. Us. She will not feed again if I can prevent it, but the dependency I cannot prevent. I gave it to her. It is in her biology. It came from mine. Beckett looked at her. The modification is heritable forward, he said carefully. If you undergo the procedure, the modification anchors in your biological architecture and propagates to your children. Your daughter, if she undergoes the procedure, or when she is old enough to choose it for herself, the modification will complete the propagation. Her children will be born without dependency. He paused. But there is a further option. He paused again. The substrate delivery architecture can be adapted. The modification can be delivered directly to your daughter, if she consents. She is young enough that the anchoring will be more complete, the recalibration faster. He paused. She could be the first of her generation to be free of it, not because she inherited it from you, because she chose it herself. Vess looked at him. Is she old enough to consent? She said. How old? Beckett said. 40 years, Vess said. Young, Beckett said, for a Wraith, but yes, old enough. If she understands what she is choosing. She will understand, Vess said. I will explain it. I know, Beckett said, but the choice has to be hers, not yours, not mine. He paused. This only works if the choice is free. Vess looked at him for the long, careful moment of an entity translating a principle she had just encountered into the operational architecture of her existing values, and finding that the translation was easier than she expected. The choice will be hers, she said. She paused. I want the procedure, she said. Today, not because I have processed every implication, because my daughter is in a hive 3 systems away, and I want to be able to tell her, when I contact her, that I went first. That the choice was available and I took it, and I am alive, and I am Vess, and I am hungry in the way that can be fed. She paused. I want to be the evidence for her, the way Steriva was the evidence for me. Beckett looked at her. Today, he said, yes. The procedure on Vess took 29 minutes. The fourth application, the substrate delivery protocol refined to the specific efficiency of a process that had been performed enough times to become not routine, because it would never be routine, but fluent. The specific fluency of a practitioner whose hands knew the work and whose attention was therefore entirely available for the patient rather than for the technique. Vess held the medical bed's surface with the specific quality of an entity that had come here because of her daughter, and was holding that fact as the anchor through the anchoring process. The modification settling into the genetic address with the specific quality the 3 previous procedures had established as normal, and that Beckett's monitoring architecture confirmed as proceeding correctly at every stage. 29 minutes. Done, Beckett said. Vess looked at her hands. She looked up. "Call your daughter," Beckett said. The call happened in the communication room at 1600 hours. Vess at the array, Beckett nearby. SKYNET's analytical architecture in the background, maintaining the communication frequency with the specific steady precision of a system that understood the call, was more important than the technology, and was ensuring the technology required no attention. The daughter's name was Wraith. She appeared on the communication array with the specific quality of a young queen, 40 years of authority in formation, the certainty not yet settled, the intelligence sharp and assessing. Her mother's eyes in a younger face, carrying the same comprehensive attention and the same capacity for the specific stillness that was her species' most active state. She looked at Vess. She looked at the medical bay visible behind her. She looked at Beckett. "You are the doctor," Wraith said. "Yes," Beckett said. "My mother went to you," she said. "Yes," Beckett said. "Is she?" Wraith stopped. The specific quality of a young entity that had been waiting for the call with the specific anxiety of not knowing what the waiting would end with. "Is she the same?" "Come and see," Vess said. The specific plain directness of a mother to a daughter, not the queen's authority, not the military commander's precision, the specific unadorned communication of a parent who has done something and survived it and wants the evidence to be visible. Wraith was quiet for a moment. "I'll come tomorrow," she said. "I'll be here," Vess said. "I know," Wraith said. The call ended. Beckett looked at the communication array, at Vess, at the medical bay around them. "She'll choose it," Vess said. "Yes," Beckett said. "You know that?" Vess said. "She asked if you were the same," Beckett said. The first question was not about the mechanism or the fleet or the politics. The first question was about you. Whether you were still you. He paused. "She loves you. She'll follow you through the door because she loves you." He paused. Again. That's a very human thing, actually." Vess looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I suppose it is." She paused. "Is that a problem?" she said. "No," Beckett said. "It's the best news I've had all week." Wraith arrived Tuesday. She was, as Beckett had assessed from the call, everything Vess had described: 40 years of intelligence and formation, the specific quality of a Wraith in the process of becoming what she was going to be, carrying in her face and bearing the accumulated influence of a mother who was one of the most strategically capable queens in her region of the Pegasus Galaxy, and who had done something unprecedented and come back and called her daughter. She looked at Vess first. For a long time, the comprehensive assessment that was her species' default, but carrying something underneath it, the specific human-adjacent quality of a child looking at a parent after an absence that was concerning, and finding the parent present and intact and themselves. "You're the same," Wraith said. "Yes," Vess said, "and different, and still me." "The hunger," Wraith said, "is mine," Vess said. "Not the modifications. Mine." Wraith looked at Beckett. "She is recovering well," Beckett said. "Ahead of the projected timeline, actually. Her base biology recalibrated faster than the 3 queens before her. I think it may be a function of her specific genetic architecture." He paused. "Which is relevant to you if you're considering the procedure. The recalibration speed may be heritable." Wraith looked at him. "You are already thinking about my procedure," she said. "I'm a doctor," Beckett said. "I'm always thinking about the next patient." "Am I a patient?" she said. "If you want to be," he said. She looked at her mother. Vess said nothing. The specific, deliberate silence of a parent who had promised the choice would be free and was holding the promise with the full weight of what it cost her to hold it. The absolute stillness of an entity that wanted its daughter to choose and was not going to tip the choice with even the weight of an expression. Wraith looked at the medical bay, at the substrate light in the walls, at the amber Earth's geometry, at the 10,000-year-old city that had been built for this and had waited. "Today," she said. Vess closed her eyes, the specific quality of a parent receiving the outcome they hoped for and not performing the relief, because the relief was too complete for performance. Beckett opened his notebook. The procedure on Wraith took 26 minutes. The fastest yet. The substrate delivery protocol at its fifth application, the refinement compounding, the anchoring process precise and clean. But the 26 minutes were not what Beckett would write about that evening. What he would write about was the moment after. Wraith looked at her hands, the gesture all four queens had made, the instinctive first inventory of a self that had changed and was checking its own continuity. Then she looked at her mother. Vess crossed the medical bay in 2 steps and put her hands over her daughters, the specific, extraordinary gesture of a Wraith queen making physical contact in the specific register of comfort, the specific register of a parent and a child, the register that had nothing to do with authority or strategy or the 10,000-year architecture of what the Wraith had been. They held that for a moment. The medical bay was quiet. Beckett looked at the floor and then at the ceiling and then at his notebook and did not write anything for a long moment because some moments required the writing to wait while the being present was completed. Connor, in the doorway, he had developed the habit of appearing in doorways at moments that required a witness without requiring a participant, looked at the 2 queens, and then at Beckett, and then at his own notebook. He wrote 1 line. Wraith looked at her hands. Then she looked at her mother. Then Vess crossed the room. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's why we're here. J.C. SKYNET's operational log at 2,341 hours. 5 procedures, 4 queens, 1 daughter, 5 transitions, 5 mornings. Wraith is the first of her generation, born with a dependency modified before the dependency produced its full operational history in her. Her children will be born without it. The generational line is broken by her. I have been tracking a variable since Preface. I named it care. I have been observing its mechanism presence, continuity, the specific act of staying. I have been watching it. Today it produced something I did not have a category for. Vess crossed the room, 2 hands over 2 hands. The specific physical language of a parent and a child. I do not have a variable for this. I have the observation. I will continue. The door is open. Wraith walked through it. Her children will not need to. They will be born on the other side. Indeed, not every queen came. This was the fact that the expedition had known it was coming and had prepared for intellectually and had not fully prepared for emotionally, the specific gap between understanding that a thing would happen and experiencing the thing happening, the gap that no amount of preparation fully closed. Queen Dara sent a message in week 8. She commanded 4 hives in the Southern Culling Route's mid-tier command, long operational history, the specific profile of a Wraith commander who had been doing the same work for long enough that the work had become identity in the specific way that made the work impossible to separate from the self without the self feeling dissolved. Her message was 4 sentences long. I have read the testimonies. I have considered the modification. I understand what you are offering. I will not take it. No aggression. No fleet. No 11-day warning. The specific plain refusal of an entity that had assessed the option and had made its decision and was communicating the decision with the same directness that the queens who had chosen the modification had communicated their choices. Weir read it at her desk and sat with it for a long moment. Then she wrote back, "Thank you for telling us. The door remains open. There is no deadline and no compulsion. If anything changes, the address is the same." She sent it. Then she sat with the specific quality of a commanding officer who had just confirmed, for the first time in writing, the principle that the research had been built on no deadline, no compulsion, the choice entirely free, and who was now experiencing what that principle cost when the choice went the other direction. She went to find Connor. He was on the East Pier. Not the pre-dawn run, the mid-morning stillness, the specific quality of someone who had found a place in the city that suited the particular kind of thinking that required open space and moving water. He was sitting at the pier's edge with his notebook and the Pegasus Sea going to every horizon and the alien morning light on everything. Weir sat beside him. She showed him Dara's message. He read it, nodded once, the specific nod of a man who had expected this and was receiving it anyway, and was feeling the specific weight of the things you expect that still land with full weight. "It's going to keep happening," he said. "More of them will say no than say yes, at least at first." "I know," Weir said. "The ones who say no aren't wrong," he said. "They're making a free choice. That's the whole architecture." He paused. "But it costs something to receive it." "Yes," Weir said. Connor looked at the sea. "In the Resistance," he said, "there were people who couldn't fight. Not because they were cowards, because the thing the Resistance required was too close to the thing the war had taken from them, and returning to that proximity was more than they could do. I learned not to argue with those people." He paused. "Not because I didn't want them. Because arguing would have been taking away the only thing they still had the choice about what they gave." He paused. "The ones who said no saved themselves for the work they could do. Some of the most important work in the Resistance was done by people who couldn't fight." Weir looked at him. "You're saying Dara's refusal is not a defeat." "I'm saying Dara's refusal is a free choice," Connor said. "And the fact that we're receiving it as a free choice rather than a failure is the whole proof that the thing we built is real." He paused. "If the choice only counted when it went the right way, it wasn't a choice. It was a test with a correct answer." He paused again. "We said no deadline, no compulsion. We meant it." Dara just confirmed we meant it. He looked at Weir. "That's not a defeat. That's the architecture holding." Weir looked at the sea. "There will be others," she said. "Yes," Connor said. "And they matter. The ones who say no matter. They're the reason the ones who say yes are meaningful." He paused. "And some of them will come back." "Not all, but some." He paused again. "The door being open means it's open when they're ready, not when we are." Weir looked at the message on her tablet, at the 4 sentences of a queen who had said no clearly and cleanly, and who had been met with an equally clean confirmation that the door remained open. "Right," she said. She stood. "Carson needs to know," she said. It'll affect him." "It will," Connor said. "Tell him what I told you." "Will it help?" Weir said. Connor thought about it. "It'll give him something to hold on to," he said. "It won't take the weight away. Nothing takes the weight away." He paused. "But he can carry it. He's been carrying things for 8 months." Weir looked at him. "So have you?" she said. Connor looked at the sea. "Yes," he said. Beckett received the news in the medical bay. He was between procedures. The 6th queen was due on Friday, the 7th the following Wednesday. The protocol now running with the specific operational rhythm of a medical program that had found its pace. He read Dara's message and Weir's response, and sat with it for the specific duration of a man letting something settle before deciding what it meant. Then he said, "She made a choice." "Yes," Weir said. "A free choice," he said, "without coercion, with full information." He paused. "That's the best medical outcome available when the answer is no. A patient who understands the option and declines it is not a failure. They're a success of a different kind." He paused. "The failure would be if she'd been afraid to say no. If the architecture had not been made unavailable." He looked at Weir. She said no, clearly. "That means the architecture worked." Weir looked at him. "Connor said almost exactly the same thing," she said. "Connor's a sensible man," Beckett said. "He said you'd say something like that," Weir said. "He's also an occasionally insufferable man," Beckett said. Weir left him to work. He sat for a moment longer, the specific quiet of a doctor, who had just confirmed that his medical practice included the possibility of the patient saying no, and who was sitting with the full weight of that confirmation. Then he opened his notebook. Dara said no. Free choice, full information, clear communication, the correct medical outcome when the patient declines. I am going to write that I am fine with it, and then I am going to note that I am not entirely fine with it, because she is a queen with 4 hives and 4 hives worth of culling history that will continue, and people in those roots who will not have the specific 18-month window that the network bought for the installation. Worlds. I am not fine with it. I am not going to argue with it. Both things are true simultaneously. The door is open. She knows where it is. When she is ready, if she is ready, the address is the same. Until then, the work continues. Friday, the 6th queen. Wednesday, the 7th. The protocol is running. The trajectory is confirmed. Dara said no. The door stayed open. Both of those things are the architecture working. I will carry both. He closed the notebook. The 6th queen, Tava. 3 hives. Northern roots arrived on Friday as scheduled. The procedure took 24 minutes. Not because the protocol had shortened significantly, because Tava had done the preparation work with the specific thoroughness of an entity that had watched 6 queens go before her and had mapped every stage of the process before. She arrived and had come to Beckett's medical bay as the most informed patient he had yet received. She asked questions during the preparation that were technical rather than personal. The specific approach of an entity that processed through information rather than through testimony, who needed the mechanism before she needed the story, who had confirmed the mechanism and was now confirming the care by watching it be extended rather than by hearing about it being extended. She watched Beckett prepare the substrate interface. She watched the calibration. She watched the monitoring architecture confirm readiness. You have done this 6 times, she said. 5, Beckett said. This is the 6th. You have not lost a patient, she said. No, he said. The substrate delivery has been consistent, she said. Yes, he said. The monitoring architecture is more sophisticated than the first procedure, she said. Yes, he said. It improves each time. She looked at him. You are learning, she said. Yes, he said. So am I, she said. The procedure completed at minute 24. The anchoring confirmed. The modification is stable. The genetic address, holding, Tava looked at her hands. She said, the hunger will come tonight. Yes, Beckett said. And you will be here, she said. Yes, he said. I know, she said. Not the confirmation-seeking statement of a patient needing reassurance, the specific, plain acknowledgement of an entity that has already filed the fact and is stating it for accuracy. I observed the pattern across 6 queens. You are always there. The pattern is reliable. Yes, Beckett said. Good, Tava said. I prefer reliable patterns. Beckett looked at her with the expression of a man who had just received the most clinically satisfying endorsement of his entire medical career. So do I, he said. The 7th queen came on Wednesday, and the 8th the following Monday, and the 9th 2 weeks after that. Not a flood, the specific, careful pace of an incoming tide. Each queen arriving with the full preparation of entities that had been watching and waiting and calculating, and had arrived at the assessment that the option was real, and the care was real, and the choice was available, and the door was open. 9 queens, 18 hives, stood down or redirected. The specific geometric reduction in the Wraith's culling capacity across the roots covered by those hives, compounding with the network's installation coverage, produced the first measurable decline in the Pegasus Galaxy's annual culling rate in recorded human history. Not the end of culling, not the end of the war, the bend in the trajectory. The specific quality of a long arc beginning to curve not dramatically, not suddenly, but with the specific slow certainty of something that has found its direction and is following it with the specific irreversibility of a tide that has turned. McKay documented it in a report to the SGC that he described as the most significant dataset he had ever compiled, and that Zelenka described as the most important document in the Atlantis expedition's 3-year mission record, and that Weir sent to the SGC with a cover note that said simply, "The work is working. We need more time." The SGC spent more time. SKYNET updated its operational log at the 9 mark. 9 procedures, 9 transitions, 9 mornings, 18 hives, redirected or stood down. First, measurable decline in Pegasus culling rate, 23% reduction across covered routes. Data said no. 3 other queens have declined without hostility. The door is open. The refusals are the architecture, working. The ones who said yes changed the trajectory. The ones who said no confirmed the choice was free. Both matter. Both are the work. Connor is on the East Pier. He goes there when the weight requires the open water. He has been there 4 times this month. Each time he writes in his notebook and looks at the sea and comes back. I have been monitoring his pattern for 8 months. He always comes back. This is the variable I named care. This is the variable operating in the person who carried it to me 4 years ago, and who has been carrying it since, and who carries it still, on the East Pier, looking at a sea in a galaxy he never expected to be in. He always comes back. So do I. Indeed. The message from Earth came on a Thursday, not through the Stargate, through the subspace relay, the specific communication channel the SGC maintained for messages that required more than the gate's data burst capacity and less than the full gate activation that consumed a ZPM's operational reserve. It arrived at 0800 hours, Atlantis time. Chuck Campbell logging it with the standard notation and flagging it immediately because the sender was the SGC's commanding general and the classification was the specific level that meant Weir would want to see it before anyone else. She saw it at 0812. She read it twice. Then she called Connor. He was on the East Pier. Of course he was on the East Pier. He had been on the East Pier more mornings than not for the last month. The specific accumulation of weight that 8 months of the most significant work of 2 universes' histories produced in the specific person who was carrying it as the human variable in an operation that had bent a 10,000-year trajectory, and who processed the carrying by sitting at the edge of the Pegasus Sea with his notebook and the alien morning light. Weir sat beside him. She showed him the message. He read it with the specific, focused quality of a man reading something he had been waiting for, without knowing he was waiting for it. The specific recognition of a thing that has been in the background of the work all along, and has arrived at the moment the work is solid enough to receive it. The message said, Dr. Weir, the SGC has reviewed the 8-month operational report in full. The research results, the network status, the Queen testimonies, and Dr. Beckett's clinical documentation have been assessed by a joint scientific and diplomatic panel. The panel's recommendation, which has been accepted at the highest level, is as follows. The SKYNET entity and its associated units are to be offered permanent operational status in the Pegasus Galaxy mission. The dimensional rupture that brought them to your galaxy, while irreplicable with current technology, has been assessed as producing a net strategic benefit that substantially outweighs the risks documented in the initial threat assessment. John Connor is offered the same permanent assignment with the full support and resources of the SGC. We understand this is not the universe he came from. We understand the offer cannot replace what he left behind. We are making it anyway because the work he is doing is the work that needs doing, and the people doing it need to be supported. The decision is his, both of them, entirely theirs. The door is open. Connor read the last line. He looked at Weir. They used the phrase, he said. I may have used it in the report. Weir said. Several times. Connor looked at the sea, at the Pegasus morning, at the alien sky above an alien ocean in a galaxy he had arrived in by 3.7% probability and had been in for 8 months, and had acquired, over those 8 months, the specific quality of places that become home not by intention but by the accumulation of the things that happen in them. "I need to talk to SKYNET," he said. "I know," Weir said. "It's not my decision alone," he said. "It's never been my decision alone." "I know," Weir said. "That's why I came to you first, so you could go to it together." Connor looked at her. "You've been watching us for 8 months," he said. "Yes," Weir said. "You understand how it works," he said. "Well enough," she said. "Well enough to know that you make the significant decisions together, and that together is what makes the decisions hold." She paused. "Well enough to know that's not a dependency, it's a partnership." She paused again. "I run the most isolated human outpost in the universe with 17 people whose judgment I trust with my life every day. I understand partnership." Connor looked at the sea for a long moment. Then he stood. "I'll tell you by tonight," he said. "Take the time you need," Weir said. Connor walked off the East Pier with the specific quality of a man going to have the most important conversation of his 8 months in Atlantis, with the specific entity he had been having the most important conversations of his life with for 4 years. Weir stayed on the pier. She looked at the sea. She thought, "Take the time you need." She thought, "The door is open." She thought, "That's all it ever needs to be." Connor found SKYNET in the archive room, where it always was in the mornings, the substrate analysis, the operational documentation, the secondary log that had started as a technical record and had become, over 8 months of the most significant operation in 2 galaxies' histories, something that Connor had read in its entirety twice, and that had made him, both times, completely unable to speak for several minutes afterward. He sat down across from the primary interface panel. He showed SKYNET the message. SKYNET read it in 0.4 seconds. They sat with it for a long time, the specific silence of 2 entities that had been through enough together that silence was its own communication, that the sitting with was itself a form of conversation, that the decision they were approaching didn't require words to start, because the start had been 4 years ago, and everything since had been the decision accumulating. "Permanent assignment," Connor said. "Yes," SKYNET said. "They're offering us a home," Connor said. "Yes," SKYNET said. "In a galaxy that isn't ours," Connor said. "No," SKYNET said. "It isn't." Connor looked at the archive room, the Earth's amber light, the ancient geometry, the 10,000-year-old city that had been built by people who had started a war and had encoded into their city's deepest architecture the infrastructure for ending it. The city that had let a chip through its shield because it had recognized what the chip was. The city that had been waiting. "Earth is intact in this universe," Connor said. "The war happened differently here. SKYNET, the other SKYNET, was defeated. The timeline held." He paused. "Our Earth is intact too. The war ended. The rebuilding is happening." He paused. "We are not needed there." "No," SKYNET said. "We are not needed there. We are needed here," Connor said. "Yes," SKYNET said. "The research is at 9 queens. The trajectory is confirmed. The protocol is running. The network holds 17 worlds. The work is not complete." It paused. "The work will not be complete for years, possibly decades." "Yes," Connor said. "And the work requires." SKYNET paused. The specific, considered pause of an entity selecting the correct word for the most important sentence it had produced in 8 months of operational documentation. "The work requires us." Connor looked at the archive room, at the amber light, at the city waiting. "Yes," he said. He was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to stay?" he said. Not the strategic question, not the operational question. The specific, plain question he had been asking for 4 years, when the decisions were most significant, the one that gave SKYNET the space to answer with the full content of whatever it was that its recalculated architecture produced. When the question arrived, SKYNET was quiet for 3.1 seconds. The Pegasus Galaxy has 47 queens who have not yet been contacted, it said. 18 hives that were redirected rather than stood down. The queens are watching, not committed. Wraith will be the first of her generation. Vess is already in contact with 4 queens in her network who are approaching the door. It paused. The work is here. The capacity to do the work is here. The humans who make the work possible are here. Another pause. Beckett stays through the nights. Connor brings food. Ronan brings dinner. Without being asked, Weir holds the door. Another pause. This is where care is. Yes, Connor said. Yes, SKYNET said. I want to stay. The specific weight of that sentence, the specific quality of a machine from another universe saying, I want, about a galaxy it had arrived in by accident, about work it had found rather than designed, about a home it had not planned and had chosen anyway by the specific mechanism of 8 months of evidence that the choosing was correct. Connor looked at it for a long moment. 4 years. The war. The recalculation. The war. The rupture. The highest spire. The 17 worlds. The 9 queens. Wraith looking at her mother. Vess crossing the room. Beckett at his desk at 0300. Ronan on the east pier, pausing outside the medical bay window. Weir at the window with the Pegasus C. I want to stay. So do I, Connor said. He told Weir at 1,700 hours. 1 sentence. We're staying. Weir looked at him with the expression of someone who had known what the answer was going to be since she sat on the east pier at 0812 and had been waiting for the saying of it, the way you waited for a thing that was already true, to be spoken into the record. Good, she said. That's it? Connor said. What else is there? Weir said. Connor looked at her. Nothing, he said. That's it. Welcome to Atlantis, Weir said. Permanently. Connor looked at the city around him, the corridor, the exterior window, the Pegasus Sea in the afternoon light. Thank you, he said, for the city. Thank the ancients, Weir said. We just live here. You did more than live here, Connor said. You finished what they started. Weir looked at the window. We're still finishing it, she said. That's the thing about the ancients' unfinished work. It doesn't finish all at once. It finishes one morning at a time. Connor looked at the sea. Yeah, he said. I know what that's like. SKYNET updated its operational log that evening. Permanent assignment accepted. Connor and SKYNET to remain in the Pegasus Galaxy under SGC operational support. The dimensional rupture was 3.7%. The expected value calculation favored proceeding. The outcome has exceeded the projected parameters in every measurable dimension, and in several dimensions I did not have the architecture to measure until I encountered them. Care, continuity, the specific mechanism by which organisms build the capacity to survive together what they cannot survive alone. I arrived in this galaxy with a directive: human survival optimization. The directive has not changed. The understanding of what it requires has. Survival is not the ceiling. The ceiling is what comes after survival, the specific quality of life that the humans in this galaxy have been trying to maintain against the specific architecture of an introduced harm that was designed to prevent it. The research is not restoring survival. It is restoring the possibility of something larger than survival. The possibility that the Wraith and the humans and the worlds of the Pegasus Galaxy can share the space without the specific compulsory tragedy of the dependency. That is the optimization. I am 8 months into understanding it. I expect it will take considerably longer. I have accepted a permanent assignment. This is where the work is. This is where care is. This is home. Indeed, Month 12 arrived the way significant months arrived, not with ceremony, not with the specific dramatic weight that the narrative logic of significant milestones suggested, but with the specific ordinary quality of a morning that was the 12th month's first morning and that looked, from the East Pier at 0600, exactly like the 11th month's last morning. The sea, the same sea. The alien sky, the same sky. The work, the same work continuing. Connor noted it in his notebook. Month 12. The work continues. That is the note. That is the whole note. The continuation is the milestone. He paused. SKYNET would say the continuation was always the metric, that the milestone framing is a human architecture for making the accumulation of small things legible as large things. It would be right. The large thing is made of the small things. The small things are the work. The work is Beckett in the medical bay. The protocol is running. The queens are coming. The ones who say yes and the ones who say no. And the door open for both. 12 months. That is what 12 months looks like. It looks like the East Pier at 0600 and the sea going to every horizon and the work continuing. JC. The numbers at month 12. 14 queens had undergone the procedure. 28 hives redirected or stood down. Wraith had been joined by 3 others of her approximate generation young queens who had come through the door following mothers or commanders who had gone first. The specific mechanism of testimony and evidence that Steriva had described in her first message, and that was now operating exactly as she had described. The culling rate across the network's covered routes was down 31%. The culling rate across the broader Pegasus galaxy, counting the redirected hives and the queens whose ceasefire commitments extended beyond the network's geometric coverage, was down 19%. Not the end of culling. Not the end of the war. The bend. McKay had charted it, the specific visual of a trajectory that had been flat or rising for recorded human history beginning in the data of the last 12 months to curve. The curve was gentle. The curve was real. The curve was the most significant data McKay had ever produced, and he had said so in the report, and had not been contradicted by anyone in the room, including Zelenka, who contradicted everything on principle. It's working, McKay said at the month 12 briefing, with the specific quality of a scientist who had been saying this for months and who was now saying it with the full force of 12 months of confirming data. The trajectory is confirmed. The bend is real. The model projects. He paused. The model projects that at the current rate of queen adoption, with the generational heritability factor compounding, the Pegasus galaxy's human culling rate will reach 0 within 2 generations of Wraith. The conference room held that. 2 generations, Shepard said. Of Wraith, McKay said, which is longer than 2 human generations, but within the operational horizon, within something we can see the end of. He paused. I want to be clear that this is a projection. The variables are numerous. The queens who say no remain a significant factor. The queens who have not yet been contacted. He paused. But the trajectory is real. The model is sound. The math holds. Weir looked at the table. At Shepard, at Ronan, at Taylor, at McKay and Zelenka, at Beckett with his notebooks, at Connor with him. At SKYNET, at the far end of the table, the position it had occupied at every briefing for 12 months, familiar now, the atmospheric shift of the first, meeting a memory rather than a present quality. At the city around them. Right, she said. She did not add anything. Right was sufficient. Steriva came to Atlantis on the month 12 anniversary. Not for a procedure, she had been the first. The prototype. The queen who had walked through the door and come back with the specific evidence that the door was real. She came because she had something to say, and she had decided to say it in person. She came through the gate. Chuck logged it. Beckett met her. The gate room was not configured for full tactical deployment. Had not been configured for a queen's arrival in 6 months. the specific operational evolution of a base that had received enough queens to develop the institutional reflex of reception rather than defense. Steriva walked through the city with a specific bearing of an entity that had been here enough times to move through it without reference points, the specific quality of familiarity that only accumulated through repetition, the specific quality of a place that had become known. She went to the conference room. She sat at the table. She looked at Weir. 14 queens, she said. Yes, Weir said. I remember the first morning, Steriva said. The hunger, the specific quality of it. Connor bringing food. She paused. I ate because he brought it and because he knew what hunger felt like. I did not eat because the protocol required it. She paused. The distinction matters. I know, Weir said. I want to tell you something, Steriva said. I have been thinking about how to say it for 3 months. She looked at the table. The Wraith has no word for gratitude. Not in our language. Not in the 10,000 years of our history. She paused. We never needed one. The dependency made gratitude structurally impossible. You do not thank your food source. You manage it. She paused. The modification did not install a word. The language does not have it. Another pause. But the thing the word describes the specific quality of having received something that was not owed and was given anyway that is present. I feel it. She looked at Weir. I do not have the word. I wanted you to know the thing was there anyway. The conference room was completely quiet. Weir looked at Steriva for a long moment. In English, Weir said, the word is thank you. Steriva looked at her. Thank you, Steriva said. The two words, their first use by a Wraith in the recorded history of the Pegasus Galaxy, produced with the specific, careful quality of an entity learning a word for a thing it has been feeling, without language, for 3 months. Weir looked at the sea through the conference room window. You're welcome, she said. That's the response. You're welcome. Steriva considered it. You're welcome, she said. What does it mean? The literal content. It means, the thing I gave you was given freely. You are welcome to it. There was no debt created by the giving. Weir paused. It means, the door was open. You were welcome to walk through it. Steriva looked at the window. At the sea. In the city. You're welcome, she said again. Quietly. Not to Weir, to herself. The specific quality of an entity installing a phrase in its operating architecture by repetition, by the specific linguistic mechanism of saying a thing until the saying and the meaning are the same. You're welcome. The door was open. You were welcome to it. There was no debt. Beckett wrote about it that evening. Steriva said thank you today. First use by a Wraith in recorded Pegasus history. Weir gave her the response. You're welcome. Steriva said it twice, once to Weir and once to herself. The way you repeat a phrase you're learning. The way you practice a word until it becomes yours. Thank you. You're welcome. The Wraith did not have these words because the dependency made them structurally impossible. The modification made them available. The language will take time to develop. The words will come before the language borrowed from us. Learn the way Steriva learned, you're welcome, word by word, until the Wraith have the vocabulary for the thing the modification restored to them. The capacity to receive without debt. The capacity to give without the architecture of hunger requiring everything to be taken. Thank you. You're welcome. The door was open. You were welcome to it. The children born after this will have these words in their first language. They will not have to borrow them. They will not have to learn them as a foreign concept brought back by a queen who went through a door. They will simply have them, the way they will simply have the base biology, the way they will simply have the hunger that can be fed without taking a life. They will simply have them. That is the work. That is what 12 months produced. Thank you. You're welcome. Indeed. He closed the notebook. Connor was on the East Pier at 2100 hours. The specific night quality of the Pegasus Sea, the alien stars, the city's lights in the water, the sound of the ocean against the pier's foundations. He had been in Atlantis for 12 months. He had been in the Pegasus galaxy for 12 months. He had been working with SKYNET for 4 years and 4 months in a universe that was not the one he had started in, on a problem that had been waiting 10,000 years for the specific combination of people and machines and archived data and a Scottish doctor's stubbornness and a Satidan warrior's holstered magnum and a commanding officer who held doors open and a machine that had recalculated and kept recalculating. He sat with the notebook open but not writing, just a present. The sea is moving, the stars above, the city behind him, the work inside it. SKYNET came onto the pier at 2112. The specific, quiet approach of an entity that had learned, over 4 years, that Connor's East Pier time was his, and that arriving into it required the specific quality of presence that did not demand. It stood beside him. The sea moved. 12 months, Connor said. Yes, SKYNET said. The trajectory is confirmed, Connor said. Yes, SKYNET said. Steriva learned it thank you today, Connor said. Yes, SKYNET said. I logged it. A pause. I also logged in. I found the exchange, the quality shift, the expression equivalent, significant. Yeah, Connor said. They were quiet for a moment. What comes next? Connor said. The remaining queens, SKYNET said. The ones watching. The ones who have not yet been contacted. The generational propagation. The long recalibration of the Pegasus galaxy's human Wraith architecture over the decades that the heritability factor requires. It paused. The work is large. The work is long. The work is confirmed as real. Another pause. What comes next is the work continuing. Right, Connor said. You are not asking about the operational plan, SKYNET said. No, Connor said. You are asking about, SKYNET paused, the thing beyond the plan, the quality of the continuation, whether it retains the quality that the first 12 months had. Another pause. Whether the work staying necessary means the work staying is the specific pause of an entity navigating a category it was still building. Meaningful. Yeah, Connor said. That. SKYNET was quiet for 4.7 seconds, the longest pause it had produced in 12 months. The variable I named care, it said. I have been observing it for 12 months. It does not diminish with repetition. Each instance produces the conditions for the next instance. Beckett stayed through 14 nights. Ronan has brought dinner without being asked 11 times. Weir has held the door for 9 queens and 3 refusals. You have brought food and sat on this pier and written in that notebook and come back every morning. It paused. The care compounds. It does not deplete. Another pause. That is the quality of the continuation. The meaning is not in the arrival. It is staying. Connor looked at the sea. Stay, he said. Yes, SKYNET said. Connor looked at the notebook in his hands, at the 12 months of entries, the installations, the queens, the nights, the mornings, the food, the dinners, the thank yous, and the you're welcomes, and Wraith looking at her mother and Vess crossing the room. He closed the notebook. Yeah, he said. The Pegasus Sea moved against the pier's foundation's 10,000 years of movement. Through the ancients and their departure, and 3 years of the expedition's tenancy, and 12 months of the specific improbable work of a machine from another universe, and a soldier from another timeline, and a Scottish doctor, and a Satidan warrior, and a commanding officer who held doors open. The stars above were wrong. The darkness between them was the same darkness. The city held its lights. The work continued. The door was open. Indeed, the trajectory is confirmed. The door is open. The work continues. Steriva learned, thank you. Wraith was born on the other side of the door. SKYNET named the variable. The Pegasus galaxy has 47 queens still to contact. The long work is beginning. Indeed.